Hello everyone, welcome to my channel. Please subscribe and stay tuned by clicking the bell icon. They like chaos. The Bear Sound team on shouting matches and family dinners. Steve Jamaria, Scott Smith, and Evan Benjamin, members of the Bear Sound team, discuss their important work on the Emmy-nominated series. Bear has earned 13 Emmy nominations for its first season, including for Outstanding Lead Actor in a Comedy Series, Outstanding Supporting Actor, and Outstanding Comedy Series. Praised and cursed by food service industry veterans thanks to its accurate descriptions of the pace and tenor of a commercial kitchen. The Bear also manages to explore themes of family, expectations, and failure to major effect. The Bear Season 2 doubled down on all that made Season 1 great, delving even deeper into the lives of its characters. As with any high-output kitchen, The Bear succeeds on the strength of its entire creative team. The Bear Sound team is a key component of the show's quality, with its supervising sound editor and re-recording mixer, Steve Major Jamaria, garnering another 2 Emmy nominations for his work. Other key members of the team are production mixer Scott Smith and dialogue editor Evan Benjamin. All 3 worked on both seasons of the hit show, including episodes like The Bear Season 2's Masterful Fishes. Steve Jamaria, the showrunner, Chris Storer, has a very complete vision for what it should look like, what it should sound like, and how it should feel. That starts at the script stage, and then in post it's always faster, louder, and it comes pretty well temped out. With things like in Review, Season 1, Episode 7, The Ticket Printer, he's like, more ticket printer. He's like, I've talked to chefs that wake up in a panic about the ticket printer. I had a brother-in-law that owned a restaurant. He's like, I can't watch the show. Scott, I'd be interested to hear how that translates on set for you. Scott Smith, what you see is pretty much how it is on set. Chris really likes to keep things fresh and let the actors improvise a lot. So what you're seeing, ultimately, is pretty much the same chaos that we're dealing with on a daily basis. It can be challenging because we have a rough idea of what's going to happen, but there are not a lot of rehearsals. We're constantly being surprised on some takes, and what happens on take 1 may not be what happens on take 4. The good thing is that once we have a sense of things, we can at least try and parse out some of the more important elements that we'd need to try to keep clean for post, so they don't get totally obliterated. Although it doesn't always work. Steve Jamaria, a lot of that stuff is baked in, for sure. That's a working kitchen, those are pots and pans. Evan Benjamin, the brief with these guys was, they like chaos. I think Chris had been to enough restaurants before he started this to know that that's what he wanted to convey. The challenge is to make something chaotic where you want it to be chaotic. It's like, I want it to be chaotic, but I want it to be chaotic here. I don't want to hear a pot landing on a stove really loudly when someone's line ends at a certain place because that's going to lose the dialogue. I have to go into another take and find even a syllable or clean it up or remove that pot using all the various technology we have access to. That's kind of part of the fun of it. We have a lot of this control now because we do have access to these crazy tools that get more and more powerful every year. That stuff is great when it's in the service of something like this. They've given us all this stuff, and thanks to Scott, we get crazy amounts of excellent raw material. They use a ton of microphones. Something is always available from somebody's body mic or the multiple booms he has set up very often. A lot of times you've got 8 or 10 people in that kitchen. They're all yelling. We want them all to yell. We don't always want to hear what they're yelling, but sometimes we really do. Sometimes there's a guy in the back, and he just yells, yes, chef, but we want it right there, and we have it. Steve Jamaria, the amount of technical ADR in Season 1 was extremely limited. Some of it was because of time and actor availability. A lot of it, most of it, was because Scott and Evan did just such an amazing job. If you have 9 people screaming over each other, you can't ADR that successfully. You could try, but it's just not going to work. It's a house of cards. If one person needs to get ADR'd, you've got to ADR 6 people because they're all talking over each other. It has to be right from set. Steve Jamaria, from an overall perspective, it was. The first 2 episodes established, like, hey, we're in the beef, and instead of cooking noises, it's construction noises. Because we have this baseline we established in Season 1 and kind of re-established in the first couple episodes of Season 2, when you go away to Copenhagen, or when you go away to Richie's episode in 207, they feel a lot different. When you go on the journey with the family back in time there, all these places feel of the show, but different, and that's intentional. You want the quieter moments in Copenhagen so Marcus can reflect on his pastries and such. Because we established, this is the sound of the show. Then going out and breaking that for different effect works quite a bit better. Steve Jo Maria. My answer is going to be different than these two. Because of the work they do, certain things like fishes weren't as hard for me. Because there are so many places to hide in those cacophonous scenes, those are not as hard to mix. The harder things for me are, like the quiet alley afterward. For fishes, the hardest scene for me was that quiet scene with Richie and Tiffany upstairs, because it was nice and quiet, and they weren't really projecting. For me, that was the hardest scene in Fishes, which is counterintuitive. All these screenfests are actually not as difficult to mix as some of the quieter parts. But that's because Scott and Evan do a masterful job. Even Benjamin. That episode was probably the hardest thing I've ever edited. The most challenging, with the most WTF moments where you're just like, how am I going to get from point A to point B? But you can do it. There's a lot of raw material, and you just have to think it through. There are solutions to all these things. That's what it feels like a lot of times. If you look at the first season, something I really liked that was very hard to do that you wouldn't think would be hard to do was when Carmy does that very long soliloquy in the last episode. It's 7 or 8 minutes. You would say, well, that's really easy. There's one shot, but in fact, the closer you get, the more there are no other sounds to distract you, the more you're focused on this person's words, and how much that really sums up the whole season, the more attention you pay to every incredibly infinitesimal sound. People are watching the show, and they don't know that I've done a very small edit to something, but those have cumulative effects. Steve Jo Maria, I think it was 200-something edits you made. Even Benjamin, did you count the edits? Now I'm tired. I have to lie down. Scott Smith, a lot of people think, oh, one person on camera. How difficult can this be? The thing is, it's completely naked at that point. There's nothing else to cover any little imperfections, any clothing noise, or any little off-screen. I'll tell you something else that I think is pretty funny in that first season, when you see Carmy and Richie fighting over the balloon dummy. Think about it for a second. You can't have a balloon because you're too far away. You can't show that, so now we're stuck with their body mix. Well, when they're struggling over that thing, what is that thing bumping into over and over again? That microphone. I would say that, even though they're struggling only for maybe 10 or 15 seconds. It's very hard to get that to sound like people talking. That's an example of something you don't think is going to be that big a deal that ends up being very challenging. Scott Smith, some are small. Some of the actors like to improv a little bit more than others, which, if you've got everybody separately mic'd, usually isn't too big of a deal. Except there's a lot of physical comedy going on in some of the scenes, so sometimes the body mic isn't really usable. Unless you happen to have able to have a boom on somebody when they're improvising something, we may or may not get it. Basically, we just try and second guess what somebody's going to do at any given time, which is just about every scene, usually. That's part of the fun, though. Season 2 of FX The Bear, the critically acclaimed original series, follows Carmy Berzato, Jeremy Allen White, Sedney Adami, Ayo Edebiri, and Richie Jaramovich, Ebon Moss-Bachrach, as they work to transform their grimy sandwich joint into a next-level spot. As they strip the restaurant down to its bones, the crew undertakes transformational journeys of their own, each forced to confront the past and reckon with who they want to be in the future. Of course, it turns out the only thing harder than running a restaurant is opening a new one, and the team must juggle the insane bureaucracy of permits and contractors with the beauty and creative agony of menu planning. The transition brings a newfound focus on hospitality as well, as the entire staff is forced to come together in new ways. Pushing the boundaries of their abilities and relationships, they also learn what it means to be in service, both to diners and each other. If you liked the video, don't forget to like, comment, and share.